Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the dawn of ancient Rome, right where the city meets the countryside, in the shadow of a long stone aqueduct. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, drop a comment telling me your city and the time right now. I love knowing where and when you're listening. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the air, cool, still, and carrying a faint scent of damp stone. You're standing at the edge of a Roman aqueduct, where mist curls up from the waterway below, like someone's quietly brewing tea for the whole city. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but the first gold streaks are slipping through the arches, drawing glowing stripes across the grass. Somewhere far off, you can hear the faint clink of tools. Other watermen starting their day, same as you. Here's a fun fact. The aqueducts carried water using nothing but gravity. No pumps, no magic, just math and stone. The gradient? Barely a whisper, maybe 1 part drop in 1,000. And yet, it worked for centuries. Historians still argue about exactly how much water flowed into Rome each day. Some say enough to fill 300,000 bathtubs. Others say, nah, that's an exaggeration. The truth is lost somewhere between the math and the mud. You breathe in, and for a moment, you feel like this aqueduct isn't just moving water. It's moving time, carrying yesterday into today, and today into tomorrow. You start your walk along the aqueduct, running your fingertips over the rough stone. It's cool from the night air, and tiny beads of moisture cling to the surface like the aqueduct has been sweating in its sleep. The sound of water below is constant, but soft. A steady hush, like the city's heartbeat. Every so often, a drop falls from the arch above, landing in the grass with a delicate plink. The Romans didn't just build these for utility. They built them to impress. Each arch is perfectly measured. Each stone fitted so precisely you could slide a knife between them and barely touch the sides. And yet, no mortar holds them together, just gravity, weight, and 1,000 years of stubbornness. You glance down at the flow beneath your feet. The water is so clear, you can see tiny fish darting between shadows. It's easy to forget this isn't a river. It's an engineered miracle, fed by springs and streams, sometimes tens of miles away. Here's a quirky fact. Aqueduct engineers had to walk the route multiple times before construction, carrying simple tools, levels, strings, rods, to make sure the slope was perfect. Too steep, and the water would erode the channel. Too flat, and it would stagnate. Imagine doing all that without GPS. Historians still argue over who first perfected this technology. Some give credit to the Etruscans. Others say the Greeks had similar systems. But the Romans, they took it, scaled it up, and made it part of everyday life. As you walk, a breeze slides through the arches, carrying the scent of time from the hills. Somewhere ahead, the faint bray of a donkey mixes with the distant splash of water hitting a catch basin. You realize this place is alive. Not in a dramatic, loud way, but in the way a sleeping city breathes. The aqueduct is its vein, and you are just a small part of the bloodstream, carrying life into the heart of Rome. You stop near a small service hut built into the side of the aqueduct. It's barely more than a stone box with a slanted tile roof, but it offers shade from the climbing sun. From a cloth satchel, you pull out a chunk of coarse bread, yesterday's leftovers. It's hard enough to double as a tool, but you soften it with a bit of goat cheese and a smear of honey. Your one indulgence. Honey is expensive, traded in small clay pots that sometimes travel farther than the water itself. As you eat, you hear the distant chatter of two fellow watermen. They are debating whether the spring water tastes different depending on which aqueduct it comes from. You smile. Rome has 11 major aqueducts, and each has its own flavor, depending on the minerals it picks up along the way. Here's a tidbit. Some aqueduct water was so prized that wealthy citizens paid extra to have it piped directly to their villas, bypassing public fountains. The rest of the city had to carry water home in clay jars, balancing them on hips or heads. Historians still debate whether this private access to water made the social divide worse. Some argue it kept the elite happy. Others say it showed just how unequal the city really was. You take another bite, chewing slowly as the shade cools your face. A small lizard scurries across the stone wall, pausing to eye the crumbs near your foot. You drop a tiny piece of bread, and it snatches the offering before disappearing into the cracks. The moment is quiet, simple. The water flows, the city wakes, and you have a few more minutes before your work calls you back. In this life, small luxuries, a bit of honey, a patch of shade, are worth more than gold. Your next task is further along the aqueduct, so you set off with a small toolkit slung over your shoulder. The sun is higher now, warming the stones underfoot. Every step is a reminder. You are part of the system that keeps this city alive. The route is long, 7 kilometers to a small crack reported near the 3rd siphon bridge. That's about an hour and a half on foot, and you'll make the trip twice today. There's no faster way. The aqueduct is your road. Here's something curious. Roman watermen weren't just repairers. They were inspectors, cleaners, and sometimes even guards. A break in the aqueduct could mean a shortage for an entire district. So your work is as critical as any soldier's post. You pass a shepherd and his flock. He lifts a hand in greeting, and you return the gesture. Out here, on the edge of the city, everyone knows the value of shared water. Some historians still argue about how many people were employed just to maintain Rome's water systems. Estimates range from a few hundred to several thousand. It depended on the season, the political climate, and the emperor's priorities. Halfway to your destination, you pause to drink from a small cistern fed by the aqueduct. The water is cool, sweet, with the faint taste of limestone. You splash a little on your face, feeling the dust loosen from your skin. Your feet ache, but the rhythm of walking is steady, almost meditative. The arches rise and fall beside you like a giant heartbeat, marking your progress. Each step is part of the city's pulse. By the time you reach the repair site, the city behind you is fully awake. Smoke from morning fires rises into the pale sky, and the hum of daily life carries even this far. You spot a line of women at a public fountain, their clay jars lined neatly on the edge. Children weave between them, laughing and splashing each other while they wait. The water splashes from a carved lion's mouth. its steady flow a gift of the aqueduct. Fun fact: not all Roman fountains were for drinking. Some were designed for washing clothes, others for watering animals. A few even served as neighborhood meeting spots. Gossip flowed as easily as the water. Historians still argue over how much of this water was free and how much was controlled by taxes. Public fountains were funded by the state, but private pipes often came with fees that only the wealthy could afford. You tighten a loose joint in the stone channel, sealing the crack with a smooth layer of waterproof mortar. The sound changes immediately. The hiss of escaping water replaced by the clean rush of a sealed flow. As you pack your tools, a boy runs up with a small cup. He dips it in the fountain, gulps the water, and gives you a quick grin before darting off. You watch him go, thinking how many lives depend on the work you do. Most will never even know your name. The fountain keeps flowing. The city keeps drinking. And you keep walking. Night in Rome feels different when you're near the water. You lean over the edge of a large stone basin. Its surface so still it could be glass. Above you, the stars shimmer. Below, they shimmer again, caught in the perfect reflection. You dip your fingers in, breaking the illusion. Ripples spread outward, scattering constellations into 1,000 trembling points. This water has traveled days to get here, and yet it rests now, calm, ready to serve. Fun fact: the Romans didn't just store water for emergencies. They used basins to regulate pressure and distribute flow evenly. Some were open to the sky, others sealed underground to keep the water cool. Historians still debate how often these basins were cleaned. Some say weekly, others argue monthly. The truth likely varied, depending on the season and the willingness of whoever drew the short straw for cleaning duty. You remember hearing about a guard once who claimed to see a comet reflected in the water before anyone noticed it in the sky. Whether he was lucky or just telling a good story, no one could say. As you sit by the basin, you notice how the city's noise fades here. The stone walls block the street sounds, and all you hear is the quiet trickle of water slipping from one channel to another. It's as if the basin itself is breathing. You linger, letting your eyes wander between the real stars and the reflected ones. it's hard to tell which feels closer. Bending down, you press your ear to a wide clay pipe. The hum of flowing water fills your head, a constant, low vibration. It's like listening to the earth itself exhale. Sometimes you catch other sounds, the faint clink of a tool far away, or the splash of water meeting a junction. Messages of a sort, traveling the length of the aqueduct. Fun fact: the Romans used different materials for pipes. Lead for durability in the city, clay for long stretches in the countryside, and even carved stone in some high-end villas. Each had its own sound when water passed through. Historians still argue about how much lead in the pipes affected public health. Some believe it caused slow poisoning. Others think the constant flow kept levels too low to matter. The debate continues, as it has for decades. As you listen, you hear the water change pitch, deeper, heavier. That means the pipe ahead is full, pushing water toward the fountains. It's a language you've learned without words, just tones and timing. You lift your head, feeling the faint echo of that vibration in your jaw. In this job, you don't just see the water. You hear it, smell it, and sense it, like a living companion. The path narrows along a hillside, and you see them before they see you. 6 legionaries, their armor catching the sun. They're escorting a cart loaded with crates, the wheels creaking under the weight. You step aside, leaning against the aqueduct wall as they pass. One soldier nods, another grins, and the last one offers a canteen. You take a sip, warm, but welcome. Fun fact: aqueduct routes sometimes doubled as military paths, especially in remote areas. The steady gradient made them easier to march along than natural terrain. Historians still debate whether the military presence helped protect the water supply or just used it for convenience. In truth, probably both. As they move on, the sound of their hobnailed sandals fades, replaced by the rustle of wind in the grass. The hillside smells faintly of rosemary, crushed under your boots. You keep walking, thinking about how the aqueduct doesn't care who walks beside it, soldier, shepherd, or waterman. The water flows for all, indifferent and steady. By midday, the heat presses down like a hand on your shoulders. You find a patch of shade under an arch and set your tools down, letting the cool stone back you up. The cicadas are loud now, their song rising and falling in waves. From somewhere farther off, the marketplace hums with bargaining voices. Fun fact, some aqueducts had maintenance alcoves, small recesses in the stone where workers could store tools or rest. They weren't luxurious, but in summer heat, they felt like palaces. Historians still argue whether these alcoves were part of the original design or added later by workers themselves. Evidence points both ways. You take out a small whetstone and sharpen your chisel. The rhythmic scrape blends with the insect chorus, almost musical. A breeze stirs, carrying the scent of baking bread from the city. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the loaf still warm, the crust cracking under your fingers. The shade is brief comfort, but it's enough. Soon, you'll be back in the sun, walking the line of stone and water that feeds a city's thirst. You're invited by an older waterman to follow a narrow trail off the main route. It winds through scrub and rock until you reach a shaded hollow. There, a spring bubbles from the earth, spilling into a stone trough. Beside it stands a small altar, just a flat slab with a carved symbol you don't recognize. A cluster of olive leaves rests there, along with a half-empty jug of wine. Fun fact, many Roman springs were considered sacred, especially if they fed a major aqueduct. Offerings were made to ensure the water stayed pure and plentiful. Historians still argue whether these rites were official religion or just local tradition. Some think they were tolerated as harmless. Others believe they were quietly encouraged. You watch as the older man pours a little wine into the water, murmuring something under his breath. Then he drinks from the spring, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. When it's your turn, the water is cool and sweet. You feel it slide down your throat, and for a moment, you understand why someone might thank the spring before taking from it. The altar stays quiet as you leave, the wine slowly mixing with the flow, carried away toward the city. A narrow stone shaft drops into the earth, just wide enough for a man to fit. You light a small oil lamp, its flame flickering against damp walls as you begin your descent. The air changes as you go down, cooler, wetter, carrying the scent of moss and something faintly metallic. At the bottom, a narrow tunnel stretches in both directions, the sound of running water echoing off the stone. Fun fact, inspection shafts were spaced along aqueducts to allow workers to access underground sections for cleaning and repairs. Some were simple vertical drops. Others had narrow staircases carved into the walls. Historians still debate how dangerous this work really was. Some accounts suggest collapses were rare. Others hint that poor construction or earthquakes could trap workers below. You crouch near the water channel, holding your lamp close. The current moves swiftly here, its surface catching the light in quick, golden flashes. A thin green ribbon of algae waves in the flow, like it's greeting you. The walls bear faint chisel marks, a reminder of the men who carved this passage decades or centuries before you. Their work still stands, still carries the same water you touch now. Climbing back to the surface, you blink in the daylight. The quiet underground hum lingers in your ears, like a tune you can't quite place. The sky darkens without warning. You hear the first heavy drops on stone, a slow patter that quickly turns to a drumming roar. The rainwater rushes down the hillsides, joining the aqueduct's channels in a frothy mix. You stand under an arch, watching it merge with the steady spring flow. The system was built to handle this. Overflow outlets, catch basins, and diversion channels guide the excess safely away. Fun fact: some aqueducts doubled as storm drains in emergencies. The engineering had to account for seasonal rains, which could overwhelm smaller conduits. Historians still argue whether these flood management designs were intentional from the beginning or adapted over time. In either case, they saved the city more than once. You step into the rain briefly, feeling the cool shock against your skin. The air smells sharper now. Wet stone, fresh earth, and something almost metallic from the storm. By the time the clouds move on, the sky is washed clean. The arches drip steadily, each drop marking the storm's retreat. You shoulder your tools again, feet squelching in damp sandals, and keep walking. The water's path never stops, not for weather, not for anything. Back at the main workshop, the air is thick with the smell of hot metal and wood shavings. Your fellow watermen gather around a low fire, repairing a copper valve. Someone tells a joke about a donkey that learned to drink from a fountain, and the group bursts into laughter. Fun fact: Roman waterworks used metal fittings, valves, spouts, and couplings to control flow and pressure. Bronze and copper were common, though they required regular maintenance to prevent corrosion. Historians still debate whether these fittings were standardized or custom-made for each section. Evidence suggests a mix of both, depending on location and the builder's preferences. You take a turn with the hammer, tapping the valve's edge until it seats perfectly. The ring of metal against metal joins the rhythm of the conversation. A tray of bread appears, passed around without ceremony. You break off a piece, its crust still warm from the morning's bake. Outside, the afternoon light slants through the doorway, catching motes of dust that dance in the air. Inside, the laughter continues, weaving through the sound of tools. A reminder that even in a job built on stone and water, it's people who make the work worth doing. Once the sun sets, your work isn't over. Tonight, you walk the aqueduct under a pale moon, its light washing the stone in silver. The air is cooler now, and the sound of water carries farther in the stillness. You check joints and listen for leaks, the world reduced to the beam of your oil lamp. Fun fact: night patrols were essential to catch problems early, especially in summer when demand was high. A leak unnoticed until morning could waste enough water to supply a neighborhood for days. Historians still debate whether patrol shifts were voluntary or assigned. Some records suggest extra pay. Others imply it was simply part of the job. You pause to watch a night bird glide low over the arches. Far below, a dog barks once, then falls silent. By the time you reach the end of your section, the moon has shifted, casting new shadows across the stone. You mark your inspection on a small wax tablet, the stylus scratching softly in the quiet. The night holds its breath, waiting for morning. Near the river, the aqueduct crosses on a series of massive stone piers. At the base of one, you notice something unusual. Tiny carved symbols, worn but still visible. They're not Latin letters, nor any script you know. Some resemble waves, others spirals. You run your hand over them, feeling the grooves, cut centuries ago. Fun fact: Roman builders sometimes reused stone from older structures, carrying with them marks from previous cultures. These could be masons' signatures, measurements, or symbols whose meaning is long lost. Historians still argue whether such carvings were decorative or practical. Without records, they're a mystery carved in stone. You sit for a moment on the pier's edge, watching the river slide past. The aqueduct's shadow stretches across the water, a bridge of both stone and time. When you stand to leave, you glance back at the marks once more. They've survived floods, wars, and centuries of weathering, quiet witnesses to a city that has changed again and again, even as the water keeps flowing. After a week of steady work, you finally have an afternoon free. You follow a narrow path into the hills, steam curling above the rocks ahead. The hot spring sits in a shallow basin, the water faintly milky from minerals. A few other watermen are already here, leaning back against the stone edge, steam wrapping around them like blankets. Fun fact: Romans loved bathing, and hot springs were both social hubs and places of recovery. Workers often came here to ease sore muscles, especially after long days on the aqueduct. Historians still debate how much of Roman bathing culture was about hygiene versus relaxation. Likely, it was both, a mix of necessity and luxury. You lower yourself into the water, the heat biting at first, then melting the stiffness from your limbs. Someone passes you a cup of watered wine, and the conversation drifts between repairs, weather, and rumors of new construction in the city. Steam blurs the edges of the world, and for a while, you forget the endless flow of stone and water. Here, time slows, and the only sound is the gentle lap of warm water against the basin's edge. Once a year, the city celebrates the changing of the waters, when maintenance crews switch the flow to a newly cleaned section of aqueduct. The main square is packed. Children weave between stalls, musicians play flutes and drums, and vendors shout over the din. In the center, a grand fountain stands silent, waiting. Fun fact: Romans timed certain maintenance with festivals to turn a practical necessity into public celebration. It kept spirits high and reminded citizens of the water's importance. Historians still debate whether this practice was city-wide tradition or limited to certain districts. Records are spotty, but the memories live on in stories. You join the crowd as a magistrate gives the signal. A moment later, water bursts from the fountain's spout, spraying high into the air. The crowd cheers, and children rush forward, letting the spray soak their tunics. You catch a few drops yourself, tasting the clean, cold freshness. It's a reminder that your work is not just unseen labor. It's part of the heartbeat of the city, celebrated in the open. One morning, you're summoned to the office of the water commissioner. He unrolls a scroll sealed with the imperial crest, an urgent order from the emperor himself. A new villa is being built for a favored general, and it requires its own dedicated water supply. Your team must reroute part of the aqueduct without interrupting the city's flow. Fun fact: high-ranking Romans often had private water lines, a mark of status that came with political influence. These projects could strain the system, forcing careful planning. Historians still debate how often imperial orders disrupted public supply. Some records suggest frequent interference. Others downplay the impact. You gather your crew, hauling extra tools and measuring rods. The work is precise, cutting into the main channel, fitting new pipes, sealing joints so no drop is lost. By sunset, the villa's fountains are flowing, glittering in the last light. The city's water still runs as before, but you know how close it came to faltering. After a long day's work, you begin the walk back. The sun hangs low, turning the sky into a wash of gold and rose. The aqueduct's arches cast long shadows over the fields. You pass farmers bringing in their tools, children chasing each other along dusty paths, and the smell of cooking fires drifting from distant homes. Fun fact: some aqueducts were designed with walkways atop the channel, allowing workers, and sometimes locals, to travel quickly between districts. Historians still debate how common these walkways were. In some places, they're well documented. In others, they may have been little more than rumor. You pause once, looking back. The aqueduct stretches behind you like a spine, connecting everything: hills, rivers, springs, and city, into one living body. By the time you reach your door, the first stars are out. You set down your tools, hearing the water in your mind, flowing steadily through the night. One evening, you sit by the aqueduct with no tools, no tasks, just you and the sound of water. It moves with the same steady pace it always has. But tonight, you hear something different. The echo of all the days before this one. All the hands that built and cared for it. Fun fact: some sections of Rome's aqueducts lasted over 1,000 years, repaired and reused by generations who saw them as part of the landscape itself. Historians still debate whether the Romans truly understood the scale of their legacy. Perhaps they built for utility, never imagining their work would outlast empires. The sky darkens, and the arches fade into silhouettes. You feel the air cool as the water keeps on, carrying the past into the present, and the present into the future. For a moment, you imagine the city without it. Silent fountains, dry baths, still mills, and the thought makes the current sound even sweeter. You rise at last, the stone cool under your palm. The aqueduct flows on, and so will you. The water hums softly in your mind now, steady and unbroken. You picture it sliding under arches, through fields, past doorways, always moving, always there. The night has deepened. Somewhere far off, a single lamp flickers in a window, and the air feels still enough to hold its light in place. You let your breath match the water's pace, slow, calm, unhurried. The sound folds over you like a blanket, a gentle reminder that life, like the aqueduct, flows best when it isn't forced. The last thing you feel before sleep is the cool stone under your hand, and the quiet certainty that the water will still be flowing when you wake. Good night.